So, about a year and a half ago, when I was 32, I caught my fiancé, Lee, who's also 32, cheating on me with my younger sister Kim, who's 30. And get this, it happened just 5 weeks before we were supposed to get married. I literally walked in on them. And as you can imagine, I ended things with Lee right then and there. It was pretty intense. Kim and Lee didn't even seem sorry about it. They told me straight up that they'd been seeing each other for almost 7 months and felt like they had this deep soul connection. When I asked Lee why we never had that kind of connection, considering we'd been together for 10 years, he hit me with this line about me being too focused on money and my career. And if that wasn't bad enough, they went ahead and got married at the same venue and on the same date I had planned for our wedding. None of our relatives had any clue about the drama that went down. After that mess, I stopped talking to my whole family for a whole year. Then about 6 months ago, my parents and I started talking again. They really wanted to make things right, so they kept apologizing for Kim's actions, basically pleading with me to forgive her. So, after all that mess with my fiancé and my sister, there came a point where my parents and I started talking again. They kept saying sorry for everything that went down with my sister Kim, and honestly, I just told them I forgave them. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, my parents invited me over for lunch, promising me that Kim and Lee, the ex-fiancé who ended up with my sister, wouldn't be there. Thing is, they'd been living with my parents. When I got to my parents' place, you won't believe what I saw. Kim was holding a baby. Yup, she had a kid with Lee. I was so mad I could barely see straight, but I kept my cool and didn't say anything. Lunch was super tense and awkward. Imagine the most uncomfortable silence, and then multiply it. And Lee? He was nowhere to be seen, which made things even weirder, like everyone was pretending nothing was wrong. But here's where things really hit the fan. After lunch, my mom, maybe trying to make things feel normal, asked me to hold my nephew. That's when I lost it a bit and told them off, saying there was no way I was going to hold a baby that was the result of them stabbing me in the back. My sister totally flipped out, started crying super hard, and accused me of hating her baby. It was just a mess from start to finish. So, after this super awkward lunch at my parents' place, I had to let them know how messed up the whole setup was. They tried to tell me they were just really sad and missed seeing their daughters getting along without any drama. I was pretty blunt with them, telling them that Kim was the one who stirred up all this trouble in the first place by getting involved with Lee. I laid it out for them pretty harshly, saying they had to make a choice between me and Kim. And to really drive my point home, I mentioned that even if they picked me, I'd probably never meet their expectations, like by having kids or whatever. The room just went dead silent after that. Before I left, I threw in a sarcastic thanks for the lunch and told them they shouldn't hold their breath waiting for me to come around again. Walking out, I could hear them starting to cry, and it hit me hard. I felt terrible because, to be honest, my parents were always pretty great growing up. They never played favorites between me and Kim, and back in the day, Kim and I were actually really close. So, after the super awkward lunch with my parents and seeing my sister with her baby, I told my parents straight up that what they tried to pull was really low. They said they were just tired of all the tension between my sister and me and wished we could get along. I was pretty blunt with them, telling them it was all on Kim for what she did, and I even went as far as to say they had to choose between us. I added a bit of a sting by saying if they chose me, I wouldn't be the daughter who'd give them grandkids because of how focused I am on my career. There was just dead silence after I said all that. I sarcastically thanked them for the lunch and told them they'd never see me again. I stormed out, leaving them crying. I felt awful because, growing up, my parents were actually pretty great and never played favorites, plus Kim and I used to be close. But the whole thing with her and my ex? I just can't stand cheaters. I've talked to my aunt and a cousin I'm really close with about everything. I was a mess and ended up spilling my guts to my cousin once. They both think I should try to patch things up, but just keep my distance and set some clear boundaries. So yeah, am I being a jerk for not wanting anything to do with them anymore? Update. It's been a roller coaster since the last time I shared my story. After storming out of my parents' house, vowing never to return, I spent weeks in a fog of anger, betrayal, and surprisingly a tinge of guilt. My aunt and cousin, bless their hearts, were relentless in their efforts to get me to talk. Not just to vent, but to really process everything that had happened. Their persistence paid off, and I started seeing a therapist to untangle the mess of emotions I was dealing with. Therapy was a game changer. It gave me the tools to understand that my anger, while justified, was also a heavy chain around my neck, holding me back from moving on. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about condoning what Kim and Lee did, but about freeing myself from the burden of hate. About 3 months after the infamous lunch, my life took an unexpected turn. I bumped into Lee at a mutual friend's engagement party. I considered leaving, but something inside me, maybe the months of therapy, nudged me to stay. We ended up having a conversation, the first since our breakup. It was awkward, painful, and oddly cathartic. Lee expressed his remorse, not in the hope of reconciliation, but as an acknowledgement of the hurt he caused. It didn't erase the past, but it added a layer of closure I didn't know I needed. Then there was Kim. Our paths crossed again at a family gathering organized by my aunt, who became the unofficial peacekeeper. I won't lie and say it was easy to see her, especially with her daughter, my niece, in her arms. But there was a moment, a look in Kim's eyes that mirrored my own pain and regret. We didn't speak much, but our brief exchange opened a door I thought I had bolted shut. As for my parents, rebuilding our relationship has been a slow process. The hurt from their betrayal lingered, but so did my love for them. We've had several heart-to-hearts, and while things aren't back to normal, there's a new understanding between us. They've apologized for their role in everything, and I've started to let them back into my life, little by little. My relationship with my niece is the most surprising development. Initially, I was adamant about not wanting any connection with her. However, seeing her at family events, innocent and unaware of the chaos surrounding her birth, something shifted in me. I'd begun to forge a tentative bond with her, separate from the turmoil between the adults. As for my own path, I've thrown myself into my career and my passions with a new vigor, and I've started dating again. It's been a journey of self-discovery, healing, and learning to trust again. I've realized that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for, and that it's possible to find peace after betrayal. So, am I the jerk? I've come to understand that healing isn't a linear process, and sometimes we have to make tough decisions to protect our well-being. My story isn't over, but it's taken a turn towards healing and forgiveness, on my own terms and in my own time. Life is unpredictable, filled with painful lows and unexpected highs. Through it all, I've learned the importance of setting boundaries, the power of forgiveness, and the strength that comes from facing our darkest moments head-on. My journey of healing is ongoing, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds, knowing that I've survived my past. Next story. So, here's the deal. My mother-in-law, who used to live about 4 hours away from us, decided last year that she wanted to move closer to our family. She ended up selling her old house and buying a new one right here in our city. While my wife was busy fixing up the new place with some renovations and painting, me and our 6-year-old daughter went to help my mother-in-law pack up and move out of her old house. Now, you've got to know something about my mother-in-law. She's got this old-school idea that guys are somehow better than girls, and has made some pretty weird and uncomfortable comments about me in the past, like commenting on how I look or even asking super personal questions. Anyway, when we got there, she was acting all polite at first. She even told my daughter that she should grow up to marry someone like me. But then things got a bit tense. One evening, my daughter wasn't feeling well and didn't eat dinner. Afterward, my mother-in-law insisted that she should still help clean up the kitchen while I should just chill out. I didn't think it was fair for my daughter to have to clean up when she hadn't eaten anything, so we ended up arguing about it. The next morning, my daughter slept in a little, and that seemed to really bother my mother-in-law. So, the situation with my mother-in-law took a turn for the worse. She dropped this rude comment saying my wife, her own daughter, is lazy, and that's why our daughter acts the same way. This really got under my skin because my wife has been working nonstop on fixing up their new house, doing a ton of work. But it gets worse. The next day, while I was outside, my mother-in-law was helping my daughter put on her socks and made this awful remark. "Don't ever get fat like your mother." I didn't hear about this comment until the following day when we were packing up more boxes. That's when I caught my mother-in-law telling my daughter something even more shocking. She said my wife had wanted to get rid of her when she was pregnant, which is totally false. The truth is, it was my mother-in-law who was pressuring my wife to end the pregnancy, claiming it would make her gain weight and that having kids ruins your life. All my daughter knew about termination was that it meant a mom didn't want or couldn't have her baby, which made her really upset and confused. Right then, I knew we had to get out of there. I took my daughter out for lunch, and then we went to the beach just to give her a break and clear her head. We talked everything through, and I made sure to promise her that none of what her grandma said was true. So after all that craziness at my mother-in-law's place, I decided to give my wife a call to let her know what was going on. She had a long chat with our daughter, trying to make her feel better. While they were talking, I found out about the nasty comment my mother-in-law made to my daughter about not getting fat. That was the last straw for me. We packed up our stuff and got ready to leave her house for good. As we were leaving, I noticed my mother-in-law had left some furniture and big boxes outside, probably planning to have movers come by later. But no luck for her, because there were no movers available. Then out of nowhere, it started pouring rain overnight, and all her stuff outside got totally wrecked. My brother-in-law wasn't too happy about this. He called me up, really laying into me, calling me names and saying I was being mean to an older person by leaving her stuff to get ruined. A week after all that, I get this letter from my mother-in-law, and she's asking me for $4,000 because her furniture got destroyed in the rain. She also wrote some pretty harsh stuff, saying my wife had somehow changed me for the worse. The whole moving drama happened right at the start of the year. Then, just yesterday, I got another letter from her. This time, she's threatening to take me to court if I don't pay up for the damages to her furniture. Update. After the whole debacle with the ruined furniture and the threats of a lawsuit, things went from bad to downright surreal. First off, after receiving that second letter threatening legal action, my wife and I decided it was time to consult with a lawyer. We figured we needed to know exactly where we stood legally, considering the whole mess was due to my MIL's own actions and words, not anything we did intentionally. The lawyer basically chuckled when we explained the situation and assured us that the chances of my MIL successfully suing us for the damages were slim to none. He advised us to hold our ground and not to engage further without legal representation. So that's what we did. But here's where it gets even crazier. My MIL must have sensed that her threats weren't having the intended effect because she switched tactics. One day, out of the blue, we received a package from her. No note, no explanation, just a package. Inside were several photo albums and a small box containing what looked like family heirlooms. My wife was in tears going through the albums, seeing pictures of her as a kid with her mom before everything went south. We were baffled. Was this an olive branch? An admission of guilt? We had no clue. But we decided to take the high road. My wife wrote her mother a letter, thanking her for the items and expressing hope that they could find a way to mend their relationship for the sake of the family, if nothing else. Weeks went by with no response. Then, just as we were starting to think maybe we'd turned a corner, my MIL shows up at our door, unannounced and uninvited. My wife answered, and I could tell from the look on her face that she was bracing herself for another confrontation. But instead of the fiery, accusatory Mill we were expecting, we found a tearful, remorseful woman who looked like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She apologized, not just a quick "I'm sorry," but a deep, heartfelt apology for everything she'd said and done, from the hurtful comments to the threats of a lawsuit. She admitted that she'd been wrong, that her behavior was out of line, and that she regretted allowing her own biases and insecurities to damage her relationship with her daughter and me. The conversation was long and emotional. There were tears, hugs, and a lot of hard truths spoken. My MIL asked if there was any way she could make amends and start to rebuild the trust she'd shattered. It was a lot for my wife and me to process, but we agreed to start slow. Family therapy was suggested, and to our surprise, MIL agreed without hesitation. It's been a few months since that day. Therapy hasn't been easy, there's a lot of pain and anger to work through, but it feels like we're making progress, little by little. My daughter, who was deeply hurt by her grandmother's words, is slowly starting to rebuild her relationship with MIL too. We've set clear boundaries, and so far, MIL has respected them. As for the lawsuit threat, it was officially retracted in writing. My MIL even compensated us for the lawyer's consultation fee, a gesture we didn't expect but appreciated. So am I the jerk for how I initially reacted, for taking my daughter and leaving that day? I don't think so anymore. It was a wake-up call for all of us, especially my MIL. It showed her the real consequences of her actions and words, and it forced all of us to confront issues we'd been avoiding for too long. It's a long road ahead, and I'm not naive enough to think everything's fixed, but for the first time in a long while, there's a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we can become a family again. Not perfect, but trying our best to understand, forgive, and grow together. Next story. So I've got this cousin, let's call her B, who really stirred up a storm in our family a couple of years back. The whole drama started because of some issues about inheritance. Basically, who gets what when someone in the family passes away? In my eyes, it all boiled down to B.I. being pretty greedy. She was always hitting up family members who were sick, trying to get them to leave money or their belongings to her kid. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because it seemed like she only showed up when she wanted something, but what really got to me was what she did to my uncle, who I was super close to. Right before he passed away, B.I. had the nerve to tell him straight to his face that he didn't really matter because he never had kids of his own. That was just cruel, considering how kind and loving my uncle was to everyone, especially to me. My uncle was like a second dad to me, and even though he didn't have kids of his own, he treated me like I was his. After he passed, going through his stuff, I found out he kept every single drawing and letter I ever sent him since I was a little kid. At his funeral, people from his job told me he had my graduation photo in his locker and would always talk about me like I was his pride and joy. Hearing that just made me cry even more, but B.I. couldn't let it go even then. She made a big scene at the funeral, complaining about not getting anything from him. My uncle wasn't rich or anything, the fuss was over maybe a few $100 at most, but the way she acted caused so much unnecessary pain. After that whole mess at the funeral, which was just a few months ago, I decided I was done with her. I haven't talked to her since then, and honestly, I don't plan to. So not too long ago, I found out from another cousin that the same cousin who caused all that drama before, has been reaching out to family members again. I was pretty surprised she got in touch with me because I thought I had blocked her on everything. Anyway, she sent me this message saying her adult daughter is sick with cancer and needs a bone marrow transplant. B.I. isn't a match, so she's been asking everyone in the family to see if they can get tested to help out. But here's the thing, hardly anyone has agreed to get tested. B.I. mentioned that without a match, her daughter's situation is pretty dire. I didn't respond to her message. I mean, it's a really tough situation, but the reason so many people are hesitant is because of how B.I. has treated everyone in the past. She's even gone as far as calling the cops and CPS on her own siblings just because they wouldn't do what she wanted. I decided to stay out of it and didn't reply to her, but now I'm getting some heat from other family members who still talk to me. They're saying I'm letting my bad feelings for B.I. affect my decision, and that I should at least consider getting tested to see if I can help her daughter. Some have even gone as far as to say that by not helping, I'm partly responsible for what might happen to her daughter. The thing is, her daughter has never really been nice to me, and she's pretty much a chip off the old block, just like B.I. At this point, I'm just over it. I don't have the willingness to get involved, especially when it comes to helping B.I.'s daughter. After everything that happened with my uncle, my willingness to go out of my way for them just isn't there anymore. So now I'm wondering, does deciding not to get involved make me the bad guy here? Edit. So at the funeral for my uncle, B.I.'s daughter was there too. And get this, she actually laughed at me when she saw that some of the gifts and flowers I had sent to show my respects got ruined by another relative. It was a pretty low moment, and there they were, Bi and her daughter looking all pleased with themselves as the thoughtful things I sent got messed up. It was a really hurtful scene, and it's something that stuck with me. Bi is walking around on eggshells now, trying to get help for her daughter, and her mom, who's in her 50s, is just like her. It's like they're two peas in a pod. Update. After I shared how things went south with Bi, her audacity at my uncle's funeral, and the whole inheritance drama, there's been a new chapter, one that I never saw coming and honestly wish I didn't have to navigate. A few weeks after I got wind of Bi's daughter being sick and needing a bone marrow transplant, and the whole family drama that ensued with me refusing to get tested, things took an unexpected turn. My phone buzzed one evening with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Turns out it was Bi's daughter, let's call her D, reaching out directly. She apologized for contacting me out of the blue, and for everything her mom had done. D said she understood why I'd want nothing to do with them, but pleaded for a chance to explain her side. Curiosity got the better of me, and we agreed to meet at a neutral spot, a coffee shop halfway between our places. Sitting across from D, I saw not the spitting image of B, but a weary, scared young woman. She was candid, sharing how her illness had been a wake-up call, forcing her to see her mother's actions and their consequences through the eyes of the family members they'd hurt. D confessed she'd been in the dark about a lot of things, including what went down with my uncle. Hearing her out, I was torn. Here was someone who, despite being raised in a whirlwind of BS making, was trying to own up to her part in the estrangement, even if it was by association. D wasn't asking for forgiveness for her past behavior, or for me to absolve B of her sins. She was asking for help to save her life, acknowledging that she had no right to ask anything of me after everything that had happened. The conversation was heavy, loaded with years of baggage neither of us packed ourselves. I left the coffee shop with a lot to think about. The next few days were a blur of soul-searching and long talks with those family members who still kept in touch. The consensus was as divided as my feelings. Some said to let bygones be bygones and get tested, while others argued that my refusal was justified, given the history. After a lot of thought, reflection, and yes, a few sleepless nights, I made a decision. Not for B, not for the family, but for me. I couldn't carry the weight of what if on my shoulders, wondering if I might have been a match and chosen not to help. So I got tested. The results came back, and it turns out I wasn't a match. Part of me felt relieved, another part inexplicably guilty, but here's the twist. I didn't regret getting tested. It was a decision made not out of hope for reconciliation, but from a place of compassion for another human being, despite the tangled web of our family's past. D and I have kept in touch, albeit sporadically. She's found a match, thankfully, and is undergoing treatment. As for B, she reached out, awkwardly trying to bridge years of hurt with a thank you that felt both genuine and desperate. I accepted her thanks, but made it clear that while I wish D, well, it doesn't erase the past or mean I'm ready to let B back into my life. So am I the a-hole here? I've wrestled with that question, but in the end, I believe I did what was right for me. I stepped up, not for B, not to win any family favors, but because I couldn't ignore a chance to possibly help someone in need, no matter our history. It doesn't mean I've forgotten, nor does it promise any future family reunions, but it's a step, however small, towards healing my own heart, if nothing else.